How's it going, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. So in the midst of all of this roster mania chaos over the past few days, right, Optic Texas looked like they're splitting. Now it looks like Optic Texas is back. There is still one stone that is left to be unturned, that being this tweet that came in from Arcitys, which says restricted free agent, I think. Now this came out on August 18th midday, and the most interesting part about all of this is that this tweet from Arcitys came in just a day after Optic Texas had made their announcement that Dashy and Illy were both free agents, Dashy being restricted, Illy being unrestricted, and it came just 2 hours before Optic Texas would go on to announce that the team was sticking. And so this tweet comes in at a very interesting window of time between us assuming that Optic Texas was gone and Optic Texas now sticking together. So was this tweet from Arcitys a joke, or was this tweet in reaction to what he believed he was hearing on the inside? Now, what I think happened here was this. We heard a lot of rumors around these last few days that Shotzi, who's an unrestricted free agent, maybe could be going to Atlanta, or maybe is at least talking with Atlanta Faze. We also heard that maybe Dashy, right during that period of time when we found out he was restricted, maybe Atlanta Faze could be a front runner to acquire somebody like him. And this was also before the tweet that came out from Arcitys. And what I personally think could have happened, as I said, without any confirmation at all, this is just me throwing something at the wall and just maybe it sticks, who knows? I think that it's possible, right, that Atlanta could have shown interest in Shotzi, whether for Arcitys or for somebody else, but most likely for him. Later, the announcement comes in that Dashy and Illy are both on the table. Conversations potentially started to intensify. Maybe Shotzi and Dashy could have been discussed. Arcitys catches wind of that and says, you know what? I got to tweet out something. I got to let everybody know that I'm technically a restricted free agent because I could be out the door. So he tweets that out. Meanwhile, Optic Texas decides to come back together and they decide to stick moving into the next year. So maybe what I think could have happened was that maybe Shotzi came to the team and said, you know what, if Illy's not going to be on this roster, or if Dashy's not going to be on this team, I don't want to be here. Who really knows the way in which Optic Texas went from not being together, then completely coming back together within less than a 24-hour period? Maybe it had something to do with the players, or maybe it had something to do with this Atlanta Faze deal, trying to get Shotzi onto this team, Dashy trying to get onto this team, maybe both of them to get onto this roster, and things fell through. Arcitys catches wind of that and then realizes, hey, maybe I shouldn't be here anymore. And that really is the only thing that we know right now. Again, all of this stuff is speculation. The only thing that is for sure is that this tweet is still up there. This tweet is still technically up there for Arcitys. And I'm not one to point this out, but I know that people have been discussing that, like, the profile picture changed, or like the banner of his Twitter changed, all that stuff. You never know. It could be something, but it does sound like, as the dust begins to settle, that that was a real reaction from him. And if that is true, that's wild, because that could mean that Atlanta Faze are interested, or at least were interested, in making moves coming into this next title. And so now that Optic Texas are deciding to stick together, does Arcitys, if these trade talks are real, say, hey, you guys wanted me out, I don't know if I want to be here anymore? And if we're being realistic, if he doesn't want to be a part of Atlanta Faze anymore, if this decision or maybe these talks did rub him the wrong way, what would be his first destination? You could throw out a few different names, but one of those teams you're going to say is Optic Texas. And you're thinking, LandO, we just talked, like, Optic Texas are good. They tweeted out that they're sticking together. I personally believe that there is still a chance. Now, how big is that chance? Very, very, very minimal. But I believe that there is still a chance that Optic could make a move if Arcitys is available. Let's say that maybe Dashy, Illy, or Shotzi weren't actually on the table. Arcitys now, decides to release that he's a restricted free agent, and maybe Optic Texas begins to entertain something like that. In regards to the tweet, we talked about this in our last video. If you do look very carefully, which you have to right now, it just says that these 4 players are going to be on the team moving into next season. Now, nothing is official, right? August 22nd is the date to look out for, because that is when free agents can sign deals moving into this next title. 2 players who are going to be unrestricted free agents as of that day are Illy and Shotzi. So while they may say, hey, this is our team moving forward, nothing can officially happen yet until that day. Who's to say the tweet could simply be deleted, and who's to say that just because those 4 players on the team, It doesn't mean that somebody else couldn't get added onto that roster, because again, we currently don't know 100% what the status of Illy is. Again, we are all hoping that he is going to be in a starting lineup specifically for Optic Texas next year. But if he is not going to be at full strength, Optic Texas could look at somebody who is very similar to Illy. We talked about the comparisons between the two very recently. Arcitys could slide into that spot, be on Optic Texas, while Illy looks to try and recover from the injury. So I want to get away from that. This video is more about Arcitys rather than Optic Texas, but is there a chance that it can happen? I still believe that there is. I still think that there is a chance. If August 22nd has not hit yet and there was no official confirmation coming in from the franchises, from the organizations, I am still under the belief that there is potential, there is a possibility for this move to be made, especially considering that we do not know 100% what's going on with Illy. If he is going to be a free agent in terms of Arcitys, right, a restricted free agent, maybe teams could be showing interest in him, right? If he is a little ticked off or maybe feels somewhat uncomfortable about the fact that he's the first one to go, if Atlanta Faze was making some decisions, if they were having conversations, which again, rumors would imply that was the case. We don't know for a fact, but he tweets this out. He's changed a few of the Twitters, the socials. If he is going to be on the move, and let's say that Optic Texas is an option, we kind of talked about them already, who could be some other teams that would be showing interest? Because if we're talking about Arcitys, right, he wouldn't be easy to acquire because he is a restricted free agent, but people will be calling this guy. There is no question about it. He's been in 3 COD Champs Grand Finals of the last 4 years. He's a 2-time world champion. He's part of one of the most dominant teams that we've seen in Call of Duty history, Atlanta Faze, back in Cold War. And I also think he recently passed Crimsix as the highest earning Call of Duty esports player of all time. So there's a lot there. And one thing that people will forget is that what he looked like as a player before he even entered into Atlanta Faze. Now, I guess kind of getting rid of that Chicago Huntsman year where he was still a great player, but still was under the radar. And then, you know, these last 2 seasons on Atlanta Faze, people forget about that Black Ops 4, that even prior to that, how talented Arcitys was. He was the guy for that E-United squad before Simp ended up joining, and that would kind of carry on forward. He was the guy. He was one of the best players in the game, unbelievably gifted. I think he can be a great in-game voice. He can help calm down the forces. Atlanta Faze literally looked upon him first to be the player to help establish what would go on to be one of the more dominant teams we've seen in Call of Duty ever. There was a reason why he was given that call, and there was a reason why, even leading in before that, he was considered to be one of the best players in the game. So let's go ahead and go down the list, right? The teams that would be showing interest in Arcitys if he were to be available. Again, if the Atlanta Faze thing rubbed him the wrong way, where could he be headed? Go and take a look, right, at the teams that would be on that list. Let's go in order. So if we start things off with the Boston Breach, currently you do have that flex position opened, maybe alongside Methods. I don't know, maybe Methods doesn't stay with Boston Breach, even though I feel like that's a definite, that flex role is open. Wouldn't be perfect. However, we did see Arcitys at time have that gun out throughout this year, so maybe Arcitys could fit on a team like Boston Breach. I don't think that's the right fit. However, we will move forward. Florida Mutineers, I mean, technically, as of this moment, they've got a full open slate for this time. There are rumors that they could be building around Dave Patty. There have actually been some LAG players who have been linked to possibly go over to the Florida Mutineers, so maybe there is interest there. However, I don't think it's going to be one of the first options. And then at the same time for LAG, this to me is one of the more, I don't know, intriguing situations at this moment. They technically have these players signed. Who knows? Maybe if he is a restricted free agent, there is a deal that could work out. You know, maybe LAG hands over a few of these players that could go to Atlanta Faze. Now, I don't know if any of these 4 would fit like Arcitys does, obviously, but even if LAG just simply bought out his contract and brought him into the team, there's been a lot of talk about, you know, LAG could be acquiring some very, you know, marquee free agents from this list that we have over here. One of those guys potentially being, you know, somebody like Attach, who I think is on, you know, top of many people's options or many people's lists right now. Attach goes back to LA, which is where he's from. Maybe that replaces Slasher and Spart, and so you have somebody like Attach on LAG as the flex. You have Arcitys as your main AR. Maybe you room forward with Hook. Maybe you roam forward with a few extra SMGs. Again, some very talented SMGs on this list. Not a ton, but LAG could be a realistic option. Now, talking about the Thieves, I mean, it's a hard sell. Like, I don't really know who he'd come in for. You know, more traditionally it'd be in for Octane, maybe it would be in for Draza. I just feel like obviously LA Thieves, they're off the back-to-back wins. They're also off of the World Championship victory. I mean, I think like maybe a Simp or a Shotzi would be the only thing that LAT might even consider, and that may not even be the case for them. And one thing to think about also for the Thieves is that like this is a team that I don't think would have the full, they wouldn't reap the full benefits to what makes Arcitys such a special player. I don't know if they would get the full value out of somebody like him. That mixed in with the fact that they just went back-to-back. They just won the World Championship. There's no reason why LAT should try and stir up anything unnecessary. Now, London just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Obviously, London is known for grabbing the players that they do from the EU region. Arcitys, I mean, technically could fit on this team. Granted, you do have Zero and Gizmo technically in these roles. I just don't see that changing up in any way. Minnesota Rocker is a more intriguing option, possibly for somebody like Arcitys. You know, they currently do have a very open slate. The only player that does sit on this team as of this moment is Fame, who is talked about. He could be a possible star moving into the next title. However, he technically at this moment would be on the bench. They have a great reputation historically when it comes down to players. Maybe they give Arcitys the keys, let him make the moves, let him bring on certain players. And I mean, what? I mean, if Attached were to sit here, and then again, it's similar to this LIG conversation. Then you have Arcitys. Then you've got those two SMG roles that maybe you grab from a different team. Maybe Minnesota is willing, since Attach was unrestricted, Arcitys would be restricted in the situation. Maybe you're able to find some all-star SMGs to pair alongside these two and you move forward that way. I would definitely keep track of like where Attach goes if the Arcitys combo starts to slow down a little bit. We don't hear a whole lot. I think those two guys could be a package on a team like LIG, on a team like Florida, on a team like Minnesota, maybe on a team like New York as well, right? This is to me one of the more interesting options possibly for somebody like Arcitys, because it does sound like for New York that Hydra is going to come back, right? Now that the Optic Texas rumors, I'm assuming, are over. The original plan, right, was for New York to give Hydra the keys, to let him say, hey, listen, we're moving on from Krim. We're totally wiping out those AR positions. Now that Krim is unrestricted, Paul technically actually does sit on the bench, if you will, so I'll put Paul back in here. And so if you are New York as of this time, you do have that flex and you do have that AR position open. Well, you know, it's still up in the air if Kismet's going to come back. I personally think that he should. That's just my personal take. However, if you are going to have that main AR position open, somebody like Arcitys could fit very well with this team. And then you have the flex open. Maybe that could be Attached. Maybe that could be Cammy, or maybe it could be somebody like Skies, right? We've already heard a lot of talk between the fact that Hydra's first option on the New York subliners very well could be somebody like Skies. So maybe we move into this MW season with Hydra, Skies, and Arcitys alongside maybe somebody like Kismet, or maybe in this flex position, it could be somebody like Cammy or somebody like Attach. Again, another situation where I feel like it is important to take a look at what could be a great AR combo moving into this next year. Both Arcitys and Attach, a lot of destinations for them. And let's say, right, that like Skies is maybe not something that you're thinking about if you're New York, or maybe even Kismet's not going to be on this team. Paul eventually gets moved. At the very least, if you are New York, I think that it would be a massive opportunity for them to build around these two players, right? To build around Hydra, to build around Arcitys. Maybe you hit these guys with the 3-year deal and say, listen, we want to build something, and we feel like you guys are our future. We've got that main AR, we've got that designated SMG. Now we just have to build around them. So I feel like if you are New York, this is a very, very interesting opportunity that you could have in front of you. Again, if that ends up working out. All right, while I reconstruct the New York subliners over here and get them back to normal, I don't know, Las Vegas Legion, I doubt it, but you never know, right? Temp is here. It sounds like Clay maybe could be going to the Las Vegas Legion. Again, I don't even know if Legion's going to be the name. We'll just call them Las Vegas for now, basically. But it sounds like it could be a choice. It just feels like with the AR conversations that are already here, I just don't see this being a landing spot for somebody like Alec. Now, one of the more interesting destinations that I think might be my favorite is the Seattle Surge, right? Maybe you bring in somebody like Arcitys to this team and take a look at what that does, right? Take a look at what a powerhouse, in my opinion, that Seattle Surge looks like. You know, if you are Seattle and you're thinking, hey, you know what? The young guns have learned everything that they could from somebody like Accuracy. They want to bring in a consistent Slayer, because there have been times throughout this year, this past season for Seattle, where they look like the best team in the world, and they look like one of the worst teams in the world, right? They go from first place finishes to the bottom of the barrel, then they go on to champs and finish top 3. There is an unbelievable amount of talent, and maybe Arcitys could be that guy to not just help build on what Accuracy did last year, but to try and make this group of unbelievably talented young players more consistent. So not only are you filling in the Seattle Surge mid AR position with somebody who is unbelievably talented from a gun skill perspective, but you're also bringing in somebody who is a great leader, somebody who has managed to work with some of the best talent in the entire world, obviously spent his last few seasons on the Atlanta Faze, for God's sake. He is more than qualified to be on this Seattle Surge team, who also feels like they could have some very, very solid future pieces too. And not that this means a whole lot, but Arcitys was linked in the very first year of the CDL before the Chicago Huntsmen came into play. He was linked actually to the Seattle Surge. I think he was supposed to go here alongside players like Envoy and Octane. So there is a little bit of history that does exist here. Obviously, it's different players now. It's a different franchise in terms of the people that exist in the front office and the GM position, etc., etc. But there is no doubt about it that if Arcitys is off of the Atlanta Faze, that Seattle Surge absolutely would consider adding him onto the team, obviously if it's feasible. But it would be very, very interesting to watch. And I think that this team would, at least for me, quickly become one of my favorites, at least on paper. I know we already talked about the Optic Texas thing, so we'll go ahead and set that aside. Now, Toronto Ultra, right? This also could be a front runner in the Arcitys acquisition journey. While it sounds like the Ultra do have technically their AR pieces, we know that at least based off of the rumors, it does sound like Scrappy is going to be on this team. There have been a lot of people talking about how Afro could maybe be on this roster as well. That's obviously still up in the air. Scrappy would technically be the easier option because he's technically on the academy team right now. If somebody like Arcitys is available, despite having your 2 AR positions by definition already locked in play, I'm giving Arcitys a call. I would still give Arcitys a call. Maybe you bring him in for somebody like Insight, just given the roles. And then given the fact that you have a young roster, I mean, take a look at that. Arcitys and Scrappy alongside of each other in the ARs. You have maybe Kleenex alongside another talented SMG. If Afro gets brought into this lineup, I would love to see him under the leadership of somebody like Arcitys. I mean, you have 3 of, without question, some of the most talent that we have in the CDL. One player who is still, totally fresh. He'd be a rookie this year. Afro coming into his second full season, 3rd season overall, and we know the talent that this guy has as well. Having Arcitys, another young player involved in this team, going to an organization that to me just has a certain culture to it that I think would match up quite well with Arcitys, which is basically doing anything and everything that you can to win, playing team Call of Duty. That is exactly what I believe that Arcitys would be interested in. He would obviously take on a much bigger, slang role. He would become really the star of this team. He'd be having the biggest of spotlights on him for this Toronto franchise, and would hope to lead them to another overall successful season. Now, do I think that Arcitys is most likely going to stay with Atlanta Faze? I do. I do think that if we're talking about front runners, we didn't talk about Atlanta Faze, but I still think that relationship easily could be mended. I really do. We don't know the severity. Maybe it was a joke after all. Or maybe it was just Arcitys saying, hey, you know what? I realize I could be a free agent. I've got a lot of talent on this team. I would be the first one to go. So maybe that could be mended very quickly. I still think that Atlanta Faze obviously is your best option, right? You have Abizi, you have Simp, you have Celium coming into a title, that of which I think they're going to be amazing in. So I know we spent a lot of time talking about where Arcitys could go, which I think is a very real possibility. But I will say that I think Atlanta Faze is the most common for him to stay on, given the fact that he's restricted, given the fact of the talent that you are with. But you just never know when it comes down to roster mania. We have seen absolutely more wild things happen in the past. And I know I didn't mention it either because we talked about Optic Texas at the start of it. But if I am giving my list of the players, or the teams rather, that I think would fit best with Arcitys, I would say, not including Optic Texas and obviously not including Atlanta Faze, I'm saying Seattle, I'm saying New York, maybe Toronto, LAG, Minnesota. I don't know if it's exactly in that order, but to me, Seattle would be at the top. New York is right there. And then obviously the list kind of goes on, from that moment. But, and like I said, that is if Optic is off the table, because if not, I think if he would come in for a player like Illy, just as an example, then I would put them at number 1. But obviously, all things considered, I think Atlanta Faze would be the best destination. They run it back and they go from there. But that is basically going to do it for this video. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are about what a possible move could mean for somebody like Arcitys. Do you think he ends up staying with the Atlanta Faze, or has he played his last series with this franchise? You know, what would be the best landing location for him? Does the Optic Texas thing still make sense? Do you think that could be a possibility? Or could there be another team, another franchise that we discussed? Maybe that could be the best place for him coming in to MW2. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. Thank you for liking this video, as well as subscribing for more future content. We are covering anything and everything when it comes down to this off season. So make sure to stay tuned for future content, and I will see you guys back here on the channel very soon.